Welcome to Citizen of Rome Dynasty Ascendant. Wow guys, I never thought a game like this would actually exist, but I'm really pleased to be looking at it today. And essentially what this game is a simulator for a Roman citizen, all the way down from the lowest plebeian possible, all the way up to the highest patrician class in the world. Now there's so much in this game, and to really unpack it in just one video would be next to impossible. It really appears to be quite simple, and I see a lot of games like this on phone systems, things like that, that appear really complicated but then end up being simple. This is the opposite. The complexity of this game goes beyond just the actual family dynamics, the need to, of course, produce an heir to carry on the family legacy, but it really follows the actual Roman family structure and the way things would have happened during that time period. So for instance, you have your paterfamilias. This is the head of your family, and your paterfamilias is going to change because each paterfamilias, as you can see over here, will eventually, like all of us, pass on and die. And the goal is to, of course, raise the next paterfamilias with, somewhat better education, maybe better quarters, etc. And through all that, you have to worry and contend with a number of other things. The prestige of your family, the personal influence of your character, and all of these things can be, of course, increased or decreased by attending certain religious festivals, paying money, maybe even going to the baths, having a conversation with other important figures, of course, in the game. But this game is just so interesting in the way it approaches family in general here during the Roman time period. So for instance, when you have a daughter, you might not want to marry your daughter off because the Roman system, very similar to the medieval system, pretty much means that all of your children are going to get a percentage of your realm, and this also applies to the game. And so you might not want to marry your daughter off because if she has a child and it's a son, then he's going to get a percentage of your realm as well, and essentially you're always going to be trying to build your wealth back up with your next character. But what's interesting is this has the Roman laws of the time, and one of the Roman laws at the time was that if you had an unmarried daughter, then you had to pay a tax every single month. So this is one of the ways that the game really forces you to actually make a decision. Then aside from all of that, you have the property aspect of the game. And if this looks like a coin simulator, like one of those clickers on the phone, this is nothing like that. This is quite different. Some, farmlands, vineyards, etc. will start failing, or will just be doing very poorly. You'll end up spending more money on essentially just paying for them than generating a profit. But of course, you need to start somewhere. And so when you first come into the game, you might want to purchase some horses, donkeys, goats. These do have their own income. They are going to generate a little bit of revenue. And over here, you can see the revenue per month. You can see sheep right now are doing very poorly. So had we had some sheep, we would essentially be spending money on them, not generating income off them. But I just like this additional part of the game. And you can see here that I have a specific amount of farmlands I can own, a specific amount of orchards I can own, etc. This is entirely based on my citizen class. You can see right here, I'm a class 3 citizen, and the class 3, I believe, are the Hastati class. And what's interesting is when you go into a new class, the game will actually give you an explanation of what that class is about. I'm going to be explaining that in the future part of this video as we proceed forward in more detail, so you can see just how in-depth that is. But it really adds a level to the game that's just fascinating, to say the least. The difference between a plebeian, a pleb, and a patrician, an actual wealthy individual. Now, you can still be a plebeian and be wealthy, but you can't be a patrician without that social respect from the other noble families, that sign of being essentially almost divine. It's very interesting, and it really changes because as you go through the game, sorry, I just had a fly land on my screen here. What happens is that, this class dynamic is going to benefit you, but it's also going to affect you negatively. So for instance, there we go, by the way, our paterfamilias just died. So now we are actually going to be playing as Crassus' son. But wow, really lost my train of thought there. For instance, when you move into class 1, or when you move into the first patrician class, you're expected to pay more taxes to the Roman state. So you're actually going to be spending a lot more money on your household, etc. That's another thing about this game, is depending on your character's specific skills, they're going to act differently, much like they would in a CK2 game. They might even have additional skills over here like stubborn. They'll also have skills unlocked by the education you give them. Some educations are extremely expensive, like hiring a private tutor, but they'll allow your son or daughter to potentially be a judge, a rhetorician, or even rise up to the Roman Senate. It is possible, but of course it takes a lot of time, a lot of investment in each character. Now what we're doing here with Crassus is actually kind of beneficial. We have no family members that we're responsible for. I actually chose my youngest son intentionally because of this, so that all money is going to be going to me and my new family. And this is what I meant about the education. So we can actually send Crassus to study under a Grammaticus. We're going to find a reputed Grammaticus, and that's certainly going to cost us more money than we have. We're going to essentially pay for his education by selling property. I've done it before, and I'll probably end up doing it again. But these are the kind of decisions you have to make in the game. Do you want to generate a lot of income for your family, or do you want to get the best education possible and, you know, sort of build from the ground up? That's what I'm currently doing with Crassus Genialis here. We're now class 5 citizens, so we've fallen back quite a few classes, but I think it's worth it because we sort of get a fresh start here after he gets out of his Grammaticus. The question is, will we even be able to afford that Grammaticus education? And we're about to find out. Of course, I'll be selling quite a few goods to pay for it, sell all of these donkeys because why not? But we'll just kind of see how it goes. We're going to go ahead and raise funds for the banquet here. Licinius' silver tongue is quite good, but we could also use this, but this would destroy our reputation if we don't have the sufficient influence, and we don't. So we need to make do with what we have. Licinius had a little too much to drink and ended up getting drunk and insulting anyone Licinius comes across, including some very important citizens. Not good. One way to win voters is to buy them tickets to various Ludi games. Let's buy tickets for a large group. Oh my goodness, those are ridiculously expensive. No, he campaigned long and hard. The results will be announced soon, but unfortunately, it's pretty likely that Licinius is not going to win here. And as you can see, because of that election, we've fallen back into the plebeian class. So we're no longer knights, we're no longer equites. People were a little annoyed by us trying to run Licinius when, let's face it, he's just not, doesn't have the respect level and doesn't have the influence and certainly doesn't have the, you know, the experience to have this office. So I can understand why people were a little annoyed at us, and that will happen in this game. So what are we going to do? We're going to go right back into the actual campaign. In the next election, Licinius did not secure enough votes, and as you can see, it's going to hurt our reputation quite a lot. But at least after the election, no hard feelings between us and the other wealthy citizens, so Licinius has been allowed back into the, or very soon will be allowed back into the Equites class. There we go. Because, you know, we're no longer a threat. I think what I'm going to do here, and of course, let me know what you guys would do in this situation, is I am going to go ahead and just make as much money as possible, pass on the legacy to Licinius, train Titus, and eventually we'll have him run for military tribune. Now, this just gives you an example of how far you can actually get as a Roman citizen. Now, this particular citizen of mine, he's actually still not really the top of the Roman citizens. He's still part of the plebeian class. Now, what we're trying to do is try to get into the patrician class, but he is the wealthiest of the plebeian class, and his job is actually a rhetor. What a rhetor does is he teaches rhetoric to students that are trying to become, you know, part of the consul, you know, or become consul, I should say, or become aedile, or become something like this inside the Senate. So we're pretty much a teacher of future politicians. But again, this is only halfway through the actual line all the way up to emperor. Now we can see I'm part of the Equites class. So this is the first class actually in the patrician class. Pretty much we are the knights of the Roman Republic, and this is a step beyond pretty much being a first citizen as a pleb. You can still have you can still have no money, I should say, in this situation, and you're going to be respected by other Romans just because of your influence level, period. Now, right here, I am a knight, an equite, but you'll see that my main profession is a physician, and you can do that because the knight is really just nothing more than a title. And actually, I'm training my son to be a grammaticus, but I'm hoping that Titus over here, now that I have a bunch of money that I'm slowly unlocking with all of my properties, which are extremely important in this game, I'm actually going to go ahead and probably give him an even better education than my son currently. So essentially my grandson will probably be the next pater familias, of course head of the Roman household. Really, really fascinating stuff so far. And of course, if you enjoy this kind of thing, make sure to let me know in the comments, because I think games like this are very rare, very few and far between. Got Crusader Kings 2, but this dynamic really does appeal to me and probably to a lot of other folks. Now, once you get to the actual Equites part of the game, you can now start running for election. But right away, you know, the first few elections, nothing serious. Military Tribune, yeah, that's pretty awesome. But again, there are more serious elections. To participate in this election, we would have to pay 1,000, and it's absolutely worth it. But we're going to have to pay 2,000 in the forum to canvass and really get that election going. And I'm thinking we might have other priorities because, as you can see, this was cost too much money and we would end up having to sell property. So in this game, you really have to decide, do you want to just wait maybe another generation until you have a bunch more money and a bunch more property, or do you really want to go for the gold right away? And if you don't go for the gold right away, if you don't move up to that next class, it can be very tough to get back up there. So keep that in mind.